We have Reena Friedman Watts, is a producer, a podcaster, a storyteller with a background in TV and social media. She's worked on shows like The Jerry Springer Show and now runs Better Call Daddy podcast, where she talks about mompreneurship, reality TV, and how to start a podcast. Welcome to the podcast, Ms. Reena. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me. That was a fantastic intro. I'm doing awesome.
Thank you so much for taking the time. So before we jump in, tell me all about the things, how you got to where you are now. Tell me the story.
Well, it's been 20 plus years around there of, working in and out of the media. I worked for a college radio station and kind of got my bearings there. I definitely think that, hindsight looking back, that's kind of where my love of storytelling began. I got the opportunity to run things manually, pre-automation, and you can get creative there where you can add music and you can edit and you can mix things up and tell the story in the way that you want. So even though it came across the AP Newswire and it was like, here's what's happening in the news, you can put your own spin on that. And I love doing that. And then I thought I wanted to work in radio. And I drove up to Chicago, got a interview at WGN, which is a fairly big station, and I didn't get the job. So, womp womp. Yeah. But while I was there was a flyer in the same courtyard that there was an intern opportunity at the Jerry Springer Show. And that was a show that I watched, and that was a show that I could relate to. And I was like, oh, yeah.
That'd be fun.
That'd be fun, right? Like I wanted to work in entertainment, and my family was cool with it. I kind of called my dad and was like, what do you think? And he was like, walk over there. You're up there already. So I did. I got through security. This is like pre 9/11, got a hold of the intern coordinator, ended up starting there 2 weeks later. And that was my first job out of college.
Crazy. So tell me all about the Jerry Springer Show.
It was crazy. I don't know if you've watched the documentary, which just came out, but I don't even think I realized how crazy that was. But looking back, I'm like, I just did things to get the job done, to get shit done. And I didn't really realize that other people weren't doing things like that in their normal jobs. Like,
give me an example.
I'm like, oh, you want me to go to a strip club and like ask if, two guys are like fighting over you, like I was calling people off the internet, like, that were offering.
That was weird, right?
Yeah, actually, I was even there pre-internet, but yeah, like really weird internet, like, early days internet of like people that were even like prostitutes or transsexuals and like offering their services. And I'm like, hey, can you tell me about that? You know what I mean?
What exactly do you offer?
Yeah. Are you in a relationship by chance? What does your family think of you doing that? How did that happen? So
were you in charge of getting guests, or kind of what was your job?
In the beginning, I was actually an intern, and honestly, they just like gave me petty cash and they were like, go entertain these people and then make sure they get to the studio the next day. I'm like, awesome. So they gave me a couple $100. I was learning Chicago right alongside them. I'm like, all I got to do is like babysit adults, eat food and party. All right. This is cool. But then I'm like, how do they decide which stories to bring? So then I started listening to people on the phone and hearing who was like getting the craziest guests. What did they say? What did they sound like? What were they doing? And then I came up with like my own version of that,
Cool.
Yeah. So I went from intern to associate producer in like a couple of months, which equates to from zero money to about 45, 50K. And then like I worked an entire season as an associate producer, and I was chasing people with handy cams around Chicago naked. I was like, flying to Jamaica and bringing Springer guests with us, helping with budgets. Again, as an associate producer, you're kind of like doing everything you did as an intern, but you're also like booking guests and like pitching stories and managing the budget and getting these people on stage. And then as a producer, like you're in charge of a team of doing that.
Gotcha.
So I really learned all of what the team does before I was running the team.
Yeah. It's usually the best way to do that.
Right, right. I was in the trenches with them.
Yeah.
Like, and even as a producer, I was kind of like, look, like knock on my door when you have a story. Otherwise, I'm going to be on the phone too. I'm going to be booking the stories too. I'm going to be like doing the whole thing myself. I want this office.
So how did they find those controversial guests, or what was the secret, or what were they looking for?
Great question. Yeah. I mean, it was back in the day. I don't know if you remember, like 1-800-96-Jerry. We were getting hundreds of calls a week. And I was going through the people that left messages. Actually, the messages that people left were like, we were fighting over those messages, because we were doing like weekly shows.
Yeah.
So those were our hottest leads. If you didn't want to be going to the strip clubs and like calling prostitutes off the internet, you wanted people calling in, especially from Kentucky, Georgia, Tennessee. Those were like our gold mine states. So yeah, we would call those people back and then we would see if they could rope in the rest of the story. All the time, it was like the person who called the show, like they already wanted to come. They were the
Yeah.
fan of the show. They had the story. They had to rope the other people in.
Gotcha.
And a lot of time too, like you would get 2 out of the 3 and then the third one's like, hell no. So then you're like, a big part of your job was like convincing the third person that, hey, it's a free trip to Chicago. You get to go to House of Blues. We're going to pay for your smokes. You get to meet Jerry.
Have all the fun. They don't do shows like that anymore.
They really don't. And honestly, it's crazy because I ended up interviewing Jerry 20 years later. And my son was like, how many TikTok followers does he have? Like, my son didn't even like know that this guy is like a freaking legend. You know what I mean?
It's crazy. You don't know. Jerry, my kids probably don't either. I've never asked.
Right.
They might
And it's
have.
like, would that have even worked today? Like a lot of what he covered was super controversial, like, KKK stories. And, he started off as kind of like a Geraldo
So,
Donahue kind of feel where he was trying to cover like serious topics, drug addicts and homeless. And the ratings were in the toilet until he started fighting.
exactly. So crazy. So after Jerry Springer, what did you do?
Well, after hearing day in and day out that relationships don't work, you're like, how long can I listen to this before it's like completely taking over my life? So I moved to LA because there wasn't a lot of television other than Oprah. And
Yeah.
like, I think Jenny Jones was in the studio next to us at the time in Chicago. So I
Mhm.
tried one sales job in the same building in NBC Tower. I was like Marcus Evans. It was horrible. Like it was such a chop shop of like calling executives and trying to get them to buy like fancy sporting event packages when, corporations were like cutting back on like executive trips. I was like, oh, this blows. And it was like, make friends with these people, which was my tactic on Springer, like make friends with people, get them to come, or make friends with people, get through the gatekeeper, and then the boss is supposed to close it. And I'm like, what if I've warmed this person up and then you drop the ball, dude? I
Yeah.
don't like this setup. You know what I mean? Yeah, I didn't like that strategy. So I moved to LA and I moved with someone that I worked with at Springer. And he was really the only person that I knew, and he got a job as a production manager and I got a job as a production coordinator on a pilot for CNN with the Kyoto Brothers Productions. And then it was really cool because they were seasoned producers. Like one was a producer, one was a director, one was an animator, and they had been working with the larger studios like Paramount and Disney, and they had relationships. And I was like, oh wow, this is a different side of the business.
Mhm.
And so we worked on this pilot. It didn't get picked up, but I saw like a different side of the industry. I was like, oh, wow, this is like fascinating. And so they offered me an executive assistant role to like do accounts payable and receivable and payroll and to work on some of these bigger productions. And I was all for it. I was like, okay, I'm going to learn like so many other positions and like what else goes into Hollywood other than the Jerry Springer show, which was the only other show that I had worked on. And I ended up working there for a couple of years, but then on the side, I was like still kind of applying to those production roles. Like I wanted to get back into the field. So I got a job at VH1 and went on the road for like 6 weeks. And then again, Hollywood is like, pilot, does it get picked up? Does it get picked up for another season? You're like bouncing all around. So I worked on that didn't get picked up, crawled back to the Kyotos. I'm like, I really love working here. Will you take me back? And then they did. And then I was still applying though. I still really loved production, like wanted to be a part of like the creative process. And I think that they like understood that because they themselves were like in the industry and like had the stars in their eyes and the dream of like living and working in Hollywood. So yeah, the second time I left, they were like, okay, you got to spread your wings now. You know what I mean?
Real.
But I'm still in touch with them. I've actually interviewed them on my podcast too. You know, a family run business, which is really cool because then you get the opportunity to get like a peek behind the curtain. You know,
Yeah.
if you work at one of these big studios, like you're kind of, I feel like, pigeonholed like into a job.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're not going to show you all of the other areas in which
Yes.
you can work.
Gotcha.
So yeah, I worked for the Kyoto Brothers, worked for VH1, kind of was there at like the forefront of reality TV, which was crazy. You
I know.
know, this was the time where it was like 24-hour operations. Like there was a team at every hour. And so I worked all of those different shifts and hours and positions. I was a post-production supervisor on Nanny 911
Gotcha.
for 3 seasons. I learned what the editors did and the post-production team did and color correction and voiceover and, you know, the field team and all of these things.
Wow.
And you kind of figure out what you like doing, what you don't like doing. And oh my gosh, wild. And how
So
it's
you
all cut
have
together.
your own podcast now. So how did you get there?
Okay. Yes, there was a lot of little steps in between. So I actually met my husband on the 3rd season of Nanny 911. I went from working 3rd shift with all the editors to day, and then we met online and he was like a grad student at Berkeley. So crazy. I was like living the Hollywood life and he was living the hippie life. And we got married after like 8 months, and then I had 3 kids in 5 years and tried to knock that out, getting shit
Yeah.
done.
Check, check, check to check forever.
Right? Like I thought I had gotten kind of Hollywood out of my system and I was like, okay, I'm 27. Like I gotta, you know, I was feeling the pressure from the family of like doing that next chapter thing. But when my kids were a couple of years old, I started to like want to inch my way back into that. Like you know, I was drawn to it and it was crazy. We actually moved from California back to my hometown. My husband got a job, a corporate gig back in my hometown. And I took a job doing research for Court TV for about 5 years.
That's
They
interesting.
needed they needed stringers. So what that is like going to different courthouses, going through all the small claims cases, like as they come in, making friends with the clerks. So, you know, when the best stories hit, like
Yeah.
getting all their cell phone numbers and uploading those stories back to Hollywood. And so I kind of kept my foot in the door with like casting and like research. And then that led from me going to the Judge Alex show to where did I go after that? Hot Bench and Divorce Court and America's Got Talent and
Like when the
casting.
court cases came in, then you would convince them to like basically go to a private decision. How is
Exactly. That's what these court shows did was when somebody was filing, if it was under like a certain amount of money, I think like $5,000 or something, it was different like per state. But
yeah.
yeah, they focused on like small claims cases. And instead of having them tried in court, they would try them actually on the show. And you had to like be okay with the decision.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the show would also pay like if you won.
Yeah. Ah, well, that's nice.
Right. So a lot of times, you know, if you sue somebody, you have trouble collecting.
Oh, absolutely.
So
No,
that was kind of an incentive,
yeah.
right, for the people to actually do it.
Yeah. So it's like it's basically like binding arbitration except on TV.
Exactly. And boy, is that a niche. I mean, look how many shows have done that.
I agree. Judge Judy. I mean, look at all of them.
The craziest thing was I went from working on Judge Alex. I did that literally through 2 children. Like, you know, I would drop them at a babysitter, you know, make friends with the clerks, go through all the cases really quick, scan them with a wand, and then like nurse the kid in the car, like on the way home, you know? But I still was like jonesing for a story. Like I found so many funny stories like that people, yeah, that
I mean, that's the people's court. You can sue anybody for anything.
let me tell you one that I found. I about like, oh my God. I called her like as, you know, I called the producer like as I saw the story. She was like, get out, give me their number now. Somebody was suing over the wrong crossbred animal. I was like, what in the world? That will send you on a freaking, search through the internet. You're like, I didn't even know that people could crossbreed animals, first off.
Yeah.
Like, did you know that?
Well, I've kind of heard something like, you get a bullshit, which is I didn't know it was a real thing.
Okay, so this was like somebody had ordered like a Z donk and they got a Z horse.
So it was a zebra and a donkey. And it was,
And I'm thinking to myself, where do these people live? Like, what? There's a business of like crossbreeding animals. Like, that's got to be against like something in like the
I'm
Bible. I
sure.
don't know. So yeah, that was crazy. Another one that went the entire show was, and this is actually a common occurrence, was, like a father had died and the kids were all suing each other over like the estate and the cost of the funeral. And what was great was they were from my hometown. So I was like, oh my God, like I'll tell everybody to listen to this episode. But it's crazy. Those stories are so heated and there's so many characters. I mean, I think it was like a family of 6 or something. So like some of the siblings had helped with the funeral expenses and like the selling off of stuff. And others were like, just give me my cut. You know what I mean?
No, those are the worst. You think you know your family until somebody dies and there's money.
Exactly. But those are great because the majority of the stories that I was finding were like landlord tenant disputes. The
That's not-
majority are that, like 90% are that. So you're like, ooh, sibling rivalry. Yes, yes, yes. Those are, and that's the same thing with Jerry Springer. Like, it's not always the story.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's just the people in the story that make the story. Like I've had Hate Your Mates, which is like literally like, a sister-in-law freaking hates her brother's wife, but they vehemently hate each other so freaking much. They will rip each other's hair out and tear each other's clothes off. I am talking real hate. They can go the whole show just the two of their hates. I
Yeah.
mean, it's unbelievable.
I think one of the craziest things I've ever seen in court is I was waiting to be heard in front of a judge, and this woman had sued this gentleman because he put a curse on her, and she really believed that he had cursed her, and so she was trying to sue him to get the curse taken off. Like, and the judge is like trying to figure out what to do with this case.
I love that. That's really funny because I had a bully growing up, and I swear to God, like I can speak Hebrew, and like I tried to act like that was a freaking curse. I think I like blessed her, but like said it in a really, mean voice. Like, or I sounded like sadistic. Yeah. Yeah, the court stuff is crazy. And another thing I learned from that actually was there were a lot of other stringers from other shows. Like the competition is stiff. So
Sure.
you have to get in with the clerks. You've got to get their cell phone numbers and be like, hey, is it like worth me driving an hour to your courthouse today? Like, is there a good stack?
Yeah.
I would bring cookies. I would like, you know what I mean? Like I got in with some of the cool ones. And like there was this one guy that worked at one of the courts and like, I might have been like extra kind of like friendly with him, but like ask him how his day's going. You want to grab coffee sometime. Like you got to schmooze these clerks to the point where anytime somebody was dropping off a case, even before it was like in the system, he's like, go ahead, just scan it. You know what I mean? So that is how I beat out the other shows, was like getting in with the clerks. There was one judge in Indiana, man. She would be like in freaking court session and she would be like, if you're quiet, you can go through the files. Like I would be at her feet, just like combing through all the file folders during those days.
It's all public record, so it just who wants
It's all public record. All I had to do was get a letter from the show, like saying I was with the show. I got security clearance at all the courts. I went to like 5, 6 courthouses for years.
the people sue people over the craziest shit. That's what I tell my clients all the time. I cannot stop them from suing you. It doesn't mean they're going to win. You can sue anybody for anything.
Another favorite was like somebody took a metal water bottle and like got somebody's car real good.
Oh, God. The drama.
But stuff like that makes great stories, Yeah.
I'm sure all the drama. I mean, litigation just generally is a shitty place to be. Both sides, obviously, no matter what it's about, especially like family law or anything like divorce court and all that shit, that's just automatically heated. But I mean, just litigation in general, you're not friends with the other side.
Never. That's actually funny that you brought that up. So I did work for divorce court too, where I just did casting for a little bit. There was another show I did too. Oh man, Bill Cunningham show, I think, wanted me to stand outside of the divorce office. Literally, where people were going in to file.
They're divorced.
I
Not
had like
online.
one day I went there, I had like a kid strapped to me in a Bjorn, and I was like handing out flyers, like, do you want to be on TV? I would kind of approach it like that. I'm like, hey, do you want to tell your story on TV? Like, everybody wants to be on TV. So if
Yeah.
you're not like, oh my God, I'm so sorry you're going through that, and you approach it like, hey, do you want to be on TV? They're like, oh, tell me more. You know, but one person was like, are you divorced? Because they're like, I'm like here with like a freaking baby strapped to me. You know what I mean? But I'm also like, unassuming, you know, like if you have a puppy or if you have a cute baby, like people will talk to you. So yeah, I totally brought my daughter to a courthouse. Oh, I had so many crazy things happen in the courthouses too. Like one person tried to get through security and I think they had a weapon on them and they refused to like turn over the weapon. It was like a fold out knife or something. You know what I mean? Yeah. And they got maced and I was like 9 months pregnant and they were like 2 people ahead of me in line because I had to go through security like everybody else.
Yeah.
It knocked my freaking breath out. I mean, I was like running to the door, 9 months pregnant. I'm like, water, you know? And then another time in Indiana, I was like I told you, there was that judge that would like let me go through the files, but they were in the courtroom and there was like somebody being tried for murder. And there was such a horrible storm in the area. It was like tornado season or something. They locked everyone in the freaking courtroom. I'm like, okay, this is like beyond the Call of Duty right now. They are not paying me enough to be locked in here.
Craziness, I know. The public court system is interesting.
It's changed though. I do feel like a little bit still not enough. What do you think?
Man, when you come out of law school, you're like, oh man, there's justice out there, and then you realize it's all a bunch of pile of shit, and it's just the court system is best use of leverage, meaning what can I leverage you not to have to go?
My dad always says, if you can stay out of court, stay out of court.
And I tell my clients that all the time because even on your best day, you're not going to get back everything you're spent. You're not going to get back anything for the years you spent in litigation, the aggravation, the time. It's not worth it. If it costs you an extra 20 grand, pay the 20 grand now, or you're going to pay me like 100. So, and plus you have, depositions and open your books to everything, even though they might not get to use everything. It's stressful and it's time consuming. And I'm just a civil lawyer. I can't even imagine what it is in like family court and all that. Litigation, the best thing litigation is leverage to settle a case so you don't have to litigate.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Oh, going through the family court stuff too. I could not believe the amount of domestic violence.
Yeah.
That was
Imagine
disturbing.
seeing that on your desk every day.
That's part of why I had to leave Springer, to be honest. Like after I kept hearing all of these failed relationships, like again and again and again, like it got to the point where I'm like, okay, like it had to get weirder and crazier and more twisted for it even to raise an eyebrow.
Exactly. This is like, yeah.
But that also taught me like understanding of people and not to like prejudge people because like really everybody is going through stuff.
Exactly. And that you don't know what everybody's got shit. You just don't know what theirs is.
It's so true. And also I've now, like you said, I've interviewed over 400 people on my own podcast. And I can tell you the common thread is that like everyone is being challenged and having mental health struggles, like everyone. So from Hollywood and after having like 3 kids in 4 years, I decided to try corporate America for a bit, which
how did that go?
Entrepreneurship and Hollywood are very similar because like you're able to kind of bounce from project to project and, person to person. And I feel very like entrepreneurial and
ADHD.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes. I like to work on a project, complete a project, and then pivot or maybe try something else. Unless, like with Nanny 911, I did end up working on that for 3 years and 3 seasons. And what was cool about that was kind of seeing it from like this crazy idea to like becoming a well-oiled ship, right? We kind of like knew what kind of stories that we wanted and the formula of the show and the team that we wanted to produce it.
Mhm.
And so that was cool to see. You don't really get to, that doesn't always happen.
No,
Uh,
that's what should happen is once you start, you should always be refining the processes and always be so you get better and better. And the main way you do that is addressing pain points, right? And not ignoring them. And having a team that is open to the criticism or the suggestions to get there.
I love that what you just said. And to be honest, my boss on that job was a seasoned professional. It's funny, I actually applied to that guy. I wore that guy out. I applied to him through the Producers Guild of America, which I was able to get into because I had produced enough shows at Springer. That was one really great thing about working there for so long. And I applied to that guy for like a year straight. At first, I was just sending him my resume and like doing like the formal, like, I would love to fucking work here, excuse me.
Right.
And that didn't work. And so finally, I just got like really bold and was like, well, Bill Clinton's no longer looking for interns. This job looks like fun. And he was a huge Clinton fan.
Oh, shit.
So that worked. It was like really thinking out of the box. I had gotten a couple crazy jobs like that. The VH1 job, again, seasoned professional. This guy had produced The Real World and Road Rules and like all of those like real, like early on reality shows. I get into this guy's office and he's like, I have a stack of resumes here. He's like, why should I hire you? And I was like, oh my God, like he's literally not even going to look at my resume. You know, you just have to have a good one liner, a good, well timed one liner, you know? And I was like, I can make a mute talk. And he loved that too, because it was a field interviewer role and he needed somebody that could like roll up their sleeves, talk to anyone, and somebody that was confident enough to do that in a kind of crazy environment.
No, I agree. You're going to do something to make yourself stand out to get picked. And it's not just what's on a resume, but an
Yeah.
interesting human being.
Yeah. And I think even with branding, I've learned that. Okay. So I did end up trying the corporate thing for a little while. You asked how that went. So when I see inconsistencies, like I have a hard time not saying something about it. So in the beginning, I was like, oh, wow, this is fun. I get to like create corporate videos and they're going to use those at their trade shows. And I had all of these creative ideas. But then when I saw that there was like people working for the parent company and people working for the subsidiary and they were like going after the same people and not sharing resources. And I'm like, dude, why doesn't that sales guy like help out that sales guy? And like, why don't they collaborate? Why are they so competitive? Why don't they like share their connections? They're all like under the same umbrella. And then one of the guys was like, if you ask that, you're like literally going to get fired, you know, like I was like, well, that just makes sense to me. You know, like,
Should be about improving processes and welcoming ideas to do things better.
but in the corporate space, I have found that that is not always encouraged.
Well, a business is a reflection of your personality as the owner. And if that's your personality, then that's what it's going to be, unfortunately.
And that will make you stagnant.
Absolutely. Especially now. So, like 5 years ago before COVID, it used to be like people would stay in shitty jobs because they couldn't find another one. Now people could find, like, it's hard, it's impossible for me to find paralegals and attorneys because there's so many jobs out there. And so
Interesting.
so once you get somebody in, you really want to keep them. You really have to be, it's a lot different than it was before COVID. And don't be wrong, it's made me a better leader because of it. And I've had to modify and change and be more open to ideas, which is good. But I think it's a different, from an employer side, it's a different world than it was.
There's no loyalty.
No, and nobody stays. I say that. I've 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 gotten people to stay because I've really worked on my processes and what I offer. But generally speaking, it's not like it was.
I talked to my dad about this too. And this is such a good lead into why I started my podcast with my dad. So my dad ran a manufacturing company with his parents for 40 plus years.
Hmm.
And as an entrepreneur, I was constantly asking him, like, how do you hire good people? How do you price your services? How do you take more than one client? How do you get rid of clients that suck?
Yeah.
Right.
Uh-huh.
And I felt like the responses that he was giving me could really help other people.
Yeah.
And so when I originally wanted to start my show with him, I mean, yeah, I wanted special time with my dad, and he's a super like character of a guy. And he's always wanted his own show, and now technology like allows for that. But I also thought that his wisdom of running a business for 40 years and a successful business and hiring and firing hundreds of people could help others.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And what it's turned into, though, has been so phenomenal because not only can my dad's wisdom help other people, but interviewing hundreds of people really has given my dad a project to work on and things to learn and has upped his wisdom rating as well.
I agree. Well, and the thing you got to understand about businesses, they're originally started by a person who has a passion for the thing that the business does, right? And very fast, that person that wants to do the thing that the business does has to learn how to run the business, which is not doing the thing that you started the business to do. And you're not necessarily naturally good at it, right? But in order to keep doing the thing that you love, you got to learn all these other things.
Oh, that is so spot on. And that's the same thing. I was like, okay, if I show people that I love podcasting and then I can put out something professional, then they're going to want me to do that for them too. And it did lead to that. But there are so many other aspects of that. Like some people don't even know how to get on Zoom. Some people don't know how to get on Instagram Live. Some people don't know how to have a stable internet connection. And other people are like, can you show me how to edit? Can you show me how to drop in music? Can you help me create my graphics? Can you do this all for me? So
Yeah,
there are lots of levels to the help that you can provide.
I agree. And it just depends on kind of where they're at and what they need. And but like if you wanted to, if you were telling somebody to start a podcast or somebody was asking you about starting a podcast, what would be your advice?
Yeah, so just honestly, the basics, right? Like you need a microphone, you need a steady internet connection. Have you ever guested on a show? You might want to try that before hosting your own because it's a lot more work than it actually looks like. I, those are like some of the beginning things that I say, but also like there are so many different ways in which you can do it, right? You can
Sure.
use Zoom, you can use Riverside, you can use StreamYard, right? That's where you can record it. Then you have to find a hosting platform. There's Buzzsprout, there's Podbean, there's Spotify for creators. So kind of try those. A lot of these, there's rss.com that offers 6 months free right now. Try the different ways in which you can record, try the different ways in which you can broadcast it to the world. See what's easy for you. To be honest, with clients, I've used Riverside, like what we're using right now.
Yeah.
My dad, for the intro and outro, likes Zoom. It's easy for him. He's a boomer. I have boomer clients that also only want that. As somebody who helps people, I need to be able to use StreamYard, Riverside, Zencaster, all
Hmm.
of them.
Hmm.
And also, people are going to want to know like what's a good starter mic? What's a good middle mic? What if I want to record in person? What So there's so many components.
There's so many layers to it, and consistency too, because lots of people start and have two or three episodes, and sometimes like coming up with ideas or it can be a lot. Finding guests or
Okay, so I have some ideas around that too. First of all, you want to interview people that you're interested in. Okay, like as a podcaster, once you launch a podcast, I swear to God, people are going to come out of the freaking woodwork. Like everybody's going to want to be on your show, right?
Mhm.
But I personally think if you are interested in them and you want them, the audience can tell that.
No, I agree. I agree. I agree completely. I've had a super range of guests. Like some people, like I think there was one or two that I tried to comprehend what they were doing with AI, and I didn't even know the questions to ask because I was so far. I don't even know what the hell we're talking about here.
Right. And so I would say if you're starting out, interview people that will give you some grace. They actually are like fans of yours and that
Please.
yeah, I think that that actually you can feel that in the recording. I just interviewed a girl who she used to be like somebody that I created content with in person live. And like we did that all over Chicago together. We've traveled together doing content. And I noticed that she was off LinkedIn for 2 years. And I kind of wanted to know why. I was like, dude, you sold a LinkedIn learning course, got almost 100,000 people to sign up for your course. And you haven't even been on LinkedIn for 2 years. Why not? But people like knew that we had a rapport. People knew that we had created content together. And also people take breaks from social media. So that in itself was like a fascinating thing I feel like to even talk about. Like what happens when you're absent for a while and you need to rebrand or you need somebody to like bring you back out of your shell to like get back in your groove? Let's talk about that.
Yeah. No, it's a lot. And there's just so much out there now.
Yes.
It's like, which one do I use? Yeah. And I think it's different for every business.
Right. Right. And that's another, like, I feel like even strategy and approach is like, are you looking to get business from your show? Are you looking to entertain? Are you looking to what is your intention of doing the podcast? I think my why has evolved.
Oh,
In the
yeah.
beginning, it was like a creative pursuit. Then I was like, oh my God, people want me to do this for them. So then I was like, maybe I should interview people that I've like actually done business with so that people know I do that and that people have had a good experience doing that with me. But then I was like, oh, damn, like when I talk about Jerry Springer and I interview like past Jerry Springer guests, which is something that's unique to me,
Yeah.
those episodes do really well. So I
Mhm.
got to sprinkle that in too. And look, as a brand, there are lots of pillars or things that we can talk about and different parts of ourselves, right? I personally blend my professional and my personal because that's just me and I'm an entrepreneur and I can do that. But not even everybody can do that. So I think that that's something to think about when you're putting together a podcast. Do you want to get personal or do you want to keep it professional? I think if you show your personality and you show who you are, that's going to help you in business. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. I think it's got to be a mix, right? You're trying to send something educational, professional, but I think being authentic is what actually makes people listen. And don't be wrong, your first couple of podcast episodes, they're going to suck. They're really going to suck. Like go back and listen to my first ones. You got to get through the suck so you can get better.
Let me tell you something else. I've interviewed people that work in the industry, and knowing how to tell your story versus editing someone or shooting someone is a skill. And
No,
the more you do it, the more comfortable you become with it, where you forget the mic is even there, the more we're able to do this.
I agree.
And so I personally think everyone should do it, but should everyone be a host? Maybe not.
Yeah,
I think if you're thinking of starting a podcast, try guesting on someone's first that you have a good rapport with.
exactly. See if you even like it.
Exactly. Exactly.
You've never done it or been on it, you have no idea.
It's true. I guested on many shows before I started my own. And in fact, I co-hosted a show before I started my own. I was connected with this guy on LinkedIn and we had a lot in common. I think our birthdays were the same. We got married like a day apart or even the same day. We had the same number of kids in the same order. And he knew that I had a casting background and he was doing this podcast on recruiting. So it was like him and one other recruiter.
Gotcha.
And then he was like, hey, do you think you could like book me some people for my podcast? I was like, oh, that's totally in my wheelhouse. I love doing that. So I started booking him some guests. And then he was like, would you ever like want to lend your voice to it? Would you ever want to sub in and be like a co-host? And I loved that. Then I ended up working for a couple podcasters. And what I learned from working from other podcasters was you need to have a place where your people can gather.
Yeah.
So I created a Facebook group. And let me tell you, for the past 4 years, I've had, I think the first year I had like 500, then 600, then 700, now 800 plus.
Really?
Yes. So, if you have people on your podcast, you can be like, hey, like after this was just the beginning of this friendship. Here's where I'm active. Here's where my people are. Here's where my community is. And I bounce ideas off of people there. I post my podcast episodes there. And on Fridays, I tell everyone in the group, promote anything.
Cool.
If you have a podcast that you want to promote, a course, a book, something cool that's happening in your life, do it there.
Ah, very cool. That's amazing.
I learned that working for Kathy Heller, host of Don't Keep Your Day Job. She had a huge Facebook following and Instagram following, and she really engaged with her audience through a private Facebook community. And it's free, it's just private. So people
Yeah.
feel safe and that they can share.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. All right. What is mompreneurship?
Mompreneurship. Oh my God. Let me tell you what that looked like today. I had to drop off 3 separate drop-offs before I did a LinkedIn Live with a past podcast guest. I had 2 kids that wanted to get to school on time, my 2 easy kids. Then I had one that was like, "Mom, can I sleep in an extra hour?" I was like, "All right." And then I had one that wanted to go to school when I had a scheduled LinkedIn Live with one of my past podcast guests that was on the calendar for a month. So I was like, "I'm sorry, but you're gonna have to wait an hour." So it's a constant juggle of trying to be a good mom, a good wife, and still doing what I love.
I think that's every mom that owns her own business or is, working in the industry, any industry,
Right.
trying
It's
to
like,
hold it all together.
how do you be a good business person? I personally think it is doing what you love, outsourcing what you don't love, and also having like other areas of your life. Like, look, if I walk on the treadmill for an hour, I am going to be in a lot better mood. Like,
I have to work out every morning, otherwise I'm kind of groggy. It just now
yeah,
it's like it's become a drug. I have, it's an adrenaline rush every morning, or I'm
yeah,
the same.
right. I mean, I have to say, like mid 40s, that kind of hit where it's like, okay, I got to have a little spiritual, I got to have a little physical, and I got to have like
Some coffee.
interests and a lot of coffee, a lot of coffee. But also being able to help people and kind of make a difference for others. That has also like been so impactful. Like I didn't realize how impactful that was going to be to have this project with my dad in my 40s where we can learn from other people and do something creative and have special time together.
It sounds like he loves it.
I'm telling you, like when I don't send him an episode in a week, he's like, "Have you interviewed anyone? Do you need a reaction from me? Who do you got? Who's in the pipeline?" Like, it's been so great.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, what's the name of your podcast?
Better call daddy because he is who I call multiple times a day. And what I have found too is that if you're a daddy's girl, like you get it. Like daddy's girls get that relationship. And if you're not a daddy's girl, people kind of like want to know what that's like. And then dads relate to it too, where they're like, I want that with my daughter. Like, how can I have that?
Mhm. I agree. And so you help people set up their podcast too and everything?
I do. I do. And
And it's
that
all
can
on that same
be,
website, the Better Call Daddy.
yeah, you can get to it from bettercalldaddy.com.
It's
You
really
know, I
cool in there. I think it's great. It looks really professional. It looks like fun. It looks fun. It's like if I had one word to describe it, it looks fun.
thank you. Yeah, I have helped people with in-person shoots and I've done it remotely. I've helped people like come up with their title and their branding, which is fun. And sometimes look, technology has really changed over the last 5 years. Sometimes people are like, "Hey, like can I meet with you a couple times and you can show me how to do it and we'll be on our way." And I'm like, "That's fine."
Yeah.
Awesome. And actually, I get really excited when I meet with somebody for a couple calls and then they are able to put something out there. That gives me immense joy. Like, I get excited about it. I'm like, dude, let me know when that first episode drops because I am going to promote that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's so exciting that, like, I've come up with a system that somebody can meet with me in a couple days and then put it out there
So,
and I can get somebody started. That feels amazing. And then there's some people that are like, can you do like everything? Can you literally take this over for me? I don't want to do any of that. Like,
I'm kind of that person.
yeah.
Somebody help me, like, okay, like give me the guest, I'll do the questions, I'll research, I'll get involved, but I like as far as producing or where it needs to go, I don't want. Yeah, I'm just not that techie.
But you got a cool sign.
I know.
I love the freaking sign. That is glorious. And I like your branding too. Quit getting screwed. Can we please?
Yes, and so it all started because I launched my first book, which was called "Quick Getting Screwed." It was about understanding commercial subcontracts in the world of construction, and because all those guys that sign those contracts get screwed, and like nobody was saying like, "Hey, don't sign this. This is all shit." So I did, and then I launched the podcast at the same time. Started with learning about business, and I've kind of had all different kinds of guests. It's been very interesting.
I love that. Well, let me tell you, I was recently approached to be a part of a documentary, but after I saw what they wanted me to sign, I was like, oh, hell no.
Exactly.
And I even think looking back on the Jerry Springer show and some of those NDAs that they signed,
Well, and that's the thing. Most people don't read
they don't read it. We encourage them that the lawyer was,
on their side, but not really.
Exactly. We're like, everybody that's been on the show says all of those words that it says not to say, and everybody who's been on the show does not obey anything in that contract, and they've all signed it. So it's like reverse psychology.
Yeah, but that's the thing is if one day he decided to, he could.
They sign their life away.
Right.
And having seen them do that, I don't want to do that. And as a mom now, I was like, oh my God, I have 4 kids that I don't want to completely embarrass. And even though it's like my chance at like Netflix and fame, I'm like, how you are construed can ruin your life.
I agree.
And whoever tells the story is in charge of the edit.
Yeah, that's kind of a dangerous position to be in. Especially,
Yeah.
the contract was like this thick and you very tiny print, and yeah, you sign away your life.
Right. And sometimes you don't even have to respond. Your face says it all. And if they can use that reaction, that's enough.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you think you would want to be like on Netflix or famous?
Not really. Like I said, my whole thing is like you said. I started this to help people. That's my real goal, and I think where I'm at, I don't I don't think there's a whole lot of people helping people. So like I'm talking about mom and pop construction businesses, right? That run a small shop, usually family owned, that need contracts, that need help, both in commercial and residential construction. And you go to a lawyer and it's like they never return phone calls, they overcharge you.
Mhm.
And so I've really made it like we return phone calls within 24 hours. We have as many flat fees as possible, so it's predictable, and then just letting them know the stuff that's out there that they should we should review your contract that you can't read before you sign it. Not to be an asshole or anything. I'm not saying you have to change anything, but at least understand what you're signing, so you can make an educated risk.
I also think that, lawyers operate in different fashions. I'm sure you know this, where if you don't even ask the right questions, you can get screwed.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Where
And
some people are like, if you have an email with me, I'm going to bill you for that. Or,
no, well, and I think too is that's probably one of my gifts is I can take complex legal ideas and break it down to where like we can have a conversation about it. Here's what this actually means, right? And I think some lawyers lose that and don't ever get it back, where they like forget like most people are talking to somebody that knows nothing about what you're saying, and then people feel embarrassed to ask, and they shouldn't, right? Because this is like a whole new, most people have never been in a courtroom, never had to do any of this, and an attorney, I think, takes for granted that everybody knows what they know, and forget that they don't, and you have to explain it in a way that people will understand.
that's so important. I've had to seek legal counsel a couple times, and even with my own podcast. And I don't think necessarily everyone has to do this, but I decided to copyright the name, like Better Call Daddy, like that concept. And also, there was a show called Call Her Daddy. You've probably heard of it. And I was like, could she sue me for
Mhm.
a similar title or whatever? And so I paid to have, the lawyer fill out the paperwork. I probably could have filled out the paperwork myself, but it wasn't like that much more expensive to have her do it. And then it would have been done well and I wouldn't have had to go through it so many times. Like, that's why I think you hire a lawyer. You're like, oh man, have her deal with all that, corporate jargon or lawyer speak that I don't understand. And it's worth the headache of just having somebody else do it. Right.
Yeah.
And then somebody came up with a show called Better Call Dad. And I messaged her and was like,
Hey.
exactly. Do we message them? And she was like, well, you know what? So many podcasts die like immediately. And right now, if somebody types in that title, like it's literally giving you more traffic. Let's just wait.
Yeah.
And turns out like the show died. But I was kind of like, as a lawyer, it would have been amazing if like she had a Google alert to that and like contacted me and kind of told me, like, is this something that you want to discuss? Is this something that you'd like to go after? Like, you paid me X number of dollars to like, you know, make sure you were protected.
Mhm. Yeah,
So
there are tons of areas like that, and especially like in something like that, copyright, especially going to, and that's the thing about law is like you need to go to the specialist who does what you need. Whether it's divorce, probate, construction, real estate, all of that. It's just like you should feel comfortable with the lawyer that you're seeing speaks the same language. Like each industry has its own language.
That's
And
a great tip. How did you pick construction?
well, I kind of ended up here. Actually, so I grew up in a small town in Illinois, and my whole family was in construction, and it was just where I grew up. It was just part of my life. And then I went to law school. Went to undergrad, went to law school, and then my last year of law school, my husband and I started a material supply company. And so then what I needed to do for our company became a full-time job, and so I opened my own firm, and it kind of grew from there. But I came into construction knowing the industry, knowing the background, because that's where I came from. So I already had a leg up on how everything would work, and then I just kind of learned from there, and then learned how to do the same things I did for us for everybody else. So
Isn't that something? How
and
it all fits together, like looking
exactly, it's like
back?
looking back at it, like this is not what I would have picked, but I love it and I'm good at it. And that all of that and where I came from really gave me a lead start to where I am now.
What does your family think about that?
Oh, they're excited, you know. They always call me when they need help. So
That's great.
exactly.
But that's legacy too.
No, I agree. I agree. Because I don't think I could I don't think I could run like a construction company. I like this part of it better where I can help people that are. Because there's lots of risk and holes out there that they don't realize that, you know, that are out there lurking all the time.
Yeah, that's almost like honestly like a metaphor right there. Like there are lots of holes. Be careful you don't fall in one that you can't get out of.
Like my job to say like, hey, try to come to me before you get in the hole. But sometimes I'm in the hole, so let's fix everything while I'm here.
You're like, it's deep. Like,
Like, let's just pay the money and learn the lesson and not do it again.
I love that. I love that. That's great.
All right. So if people want to know about you, it's more bettercalldaddy.com.
BetterCallDaddy.com, and you can find me on most social at Reena Friedman Watts.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show. It's been a lot of fun.
I absolutely loved it. Thank you so much for having me.
All right.